Coffee time with Officer Fox, the Magic Catheter.
And so my partner and I, we make an arrest. And this kid had been in a van and he had a stolen Glock. The Glock turned out to be an officer's gun. But anyway, when we pulled him out of the car, he didn't want to be arrested. So the fight was on and we ended up getting cuffed, but in the process, he got struck in the head with a flashlight. And so he had a gash on his head. So we had to take him to Harborview because the jail wouldn't take him with a visible injury. So anyway, you get him to the hospital and he's crying and whining the whole way. And he told us that he had sickle cell anemia. So we get him to the hospital and he tells us, I can't walk. So we didn't get him a wheelchair. We just got him a plastic chair out in the lobby and we put him in the plastic chair and we brought him into the hospital and brought him in and he told them that he'd been struck in the head, lost consciousness, and that he was paralyzed. He wasn't moving. He couldn't move. So we knew everything had been fine. He'd never lost consciousness, but he was just playing the game. So anyway, we get him into the hospital and they get him on a gurney and he's telling the nurses what bunch of bad police officers we were. We beat him in the head and all of it was true. He had been struck in the head. And the nurses at Harborview were usually very good, but sometimes you've got some that didn't like the police. And we actually had one and she didn't like the police. And they got him on a gurney. He was in 5 points because he had been resistive. And so they cut all his clothes off of it. And the nurse was being real nice to him and he was being real nice to the nurse. And they brought the doctor in and they started testing him for being paralyzed. And they were sticking needles in his toes, sticking him in his leg. And he wasn't giving any reaction. So I'm looking at my partner and he's looking at me and I'm like, this is not what we thought. And so he'd done real well. He'd given no reaction to the needles or anything. And he was 5-pointed on the stretcher. And the nurses were giving us a hard time. And they asked him, what did they hit you? He goes, the billy hammers. He said, beat me with the billy hammers. The nurses looked down and said, what's a billy hammer? We're like, you don't know what a billy hammer is. You got to ask him. He's the one telling you. I don't know what billy hammer is. And he's like, she asked him, and he's like, she goes, what's a billy hammer? She goes, that's the things hanging off the bills. They're billy hammers. And we had our flashlights, the SL20 aluminum flashlights. And we had struck him with the billy hammers, but we never heard that. But anyway, so he's there and we've been there for an hour and a half now. It was a busy Friday night. And apparently he gets thirsty. And the nurses were definitely on his side. They were giving us side eye and they were not happy with us. But he wanted some water. And they told him, you can't have any water. We're going to do some more x-rays. And we don't know what you ate. He's like, no, give me some water. And she's like, I'm not going to give you any water. And he starts saying, listen, bitch, give me some water. And she's getting agitated, and he's now yelling and screaming, still not moving. And finally calls her cut. He says, hey, come give me some water. Well, apparently that was her borderline. So now she's not really happy with her patient that we have abused. So she leaves, and she comes back with the catheter. And she goes, I have to give you this catheter, and then I can give me some water. And he's like, all right. And they cut all his clothes off. And so he was naked on the gurney, 5-pointed restraints. And he was naked underneath. And so she pulls back the blanket. Now, this catheter, I've seen catheters before, they vary in diameter. This was about the size of a garden hose. And she had not lubed it up or anything. And so she grabs a hold of his privates. Well, first she pulls the sheet back and she's got the catheter in one hand and he goes, where's that go? In my leg? And she goes, not really. She grabbed his privates and grabbed that catheter and started feeding it in there overhanded. She literally came off of that gurney screaming, I ain't paralyzed. I ain't paralyzed. I ain't paralyzed. Every single everything on his toes were moving, his feet were moving, and he was no longer paralyzed. They didn't do him any good because she made that catheter work just like it was supposed to. But me and my partner were very much relieved that he wasn't paralyzed. And our hospital journey didn't last much longer after that because there was no further tests to do because he was not paralyzed.